we are going to learn Torah, which is a Jewish book of scriptures. And the most important is it's the human experience of being spiritual in the human body. Judaism believes that it's not a religion, it's a way of living. And the reason we're here on this planet, on this earth, in this body, is to bring the light into the darkness and illuminate every aspect of our existence. Sefer Bereshit, the book of Bereshit, the Genesis, the beginning. The first book is describing how God has created the universe. Now, we need to remember that it's partially symbolic and it's not quite one-to-one. So, when we start with a book saying Bereshit, in Hebrew, every letter has a meaning, a numerological sequence. So when we start the book of beginning with Bet,
Bet is the second letter, which shows there's a first universe before.
There was a previous civilization, and what we're talking is subsequent creation. And also, Judaism believes that time doesn't really exist, which means this moment of creation continues every single moment, every single...
Why do they call it in the beginning then?
For you to understand the sequence of events logically as well as experientially. And what it means that every single moment now, you create in the universe along with God, because you are made of God, you are part of God. So when we say in the beginning God created the earth and the heavens, and the world was emptiness and there was darkness, and then the Spirit of God was hovering within it and around it, and then he creates light, because this is the first separation into duality of existence, from oneness into separate being. And this is what characterizes our reality at the moment. So this is also implies how we think. So if your mind is in vague and darkness and you don't know where you're starting or where you're going, you need to find something to focus on, which is light. It says also in a human interpretation that God saw that it's good and then he continued to create, which means when you create light, you can expand on it. Darkness just draws more darkness. Does it make sense? If you want better life, you need to do more things that make you feel better.
Oh, you meant like morality?
Happier. Yeah.
Okay.
Secondly, there are several mentionings of God in the Torah in different ways.
Okay.
When God is mentioned as Elohim,
Female, right?
no, male.
Oh.
That implies it's also plural. Yes, because El is one, Elohim is plural. So that implies the objective masculine energy of creation from nothing. It's like pure judgment, pure manifestation. There's no emotional aspect to it. If it says, for example, Shekhinah, that will be the feminine aspect of God, which is more compassionate, and as an aspect of Rachamim, which is compassion.
It's like Greek gods.
But it's all in one. Okay. Also, the creation was divided by days. So there was the first day where he created the heavens of above the earth and below the earth, basically created the atmosphere. And he said, this is Yom Sheni, the second day, which is Monday in Hebrew.
Yom Sheni.
Okay.
Yes? So the first day was creation of light versus darkness, Yom Echad. Okay, it's interesting that it's not Yom Rishon.
Why?
It's
Yom
Yom Echad. One day as opposed to first day.
Yeah.
Because...
I thought you said the first day.
No, the reality, the translation is when he created dark and light, the separation, it says he counted number one. But it's not the first because time didn't exist from that moment. Time is a creation of
So
human
why do they call
people.
it number one?
To show you that separate it into stages.
Okay.
the second says second day, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So in Hebrew, Yom Echad.
It's different from Yom Rishon.
It's not Yom Echad is.
Yom
day,
Echad is
like
1, 2, 3.
day, like
one day.
But it's not the first day.
That's it.
It's not the first day. In English you say first day.
In English, what did they
Yom
say?
Echad.
Yes, they said first day.
That's
So
not
they
right.
mistranslated it.
That's something like that.
We have a whole chapter. It's the energy book, and we have a whole chapter written about the elements and how the universe and your body operates within these elements. So, he created day and light on the first time, then he decided to do the atmosphere on the second, and then on the soil, on the earth, there was decision to make grass. Interestingly, there's 2 chapters of Bereshit, and the reason for it, partly because different people wrote it. It was always oral tradition. So when they collected the books and decided to write it down properly, there were different debates on what to add because people remember it differently.
I thought Moses brought it down.
No, it was physically written in 15th century or so.
No, I thought Moses brought it down.
He only wrote down 10 commandments, literally, and it was 10 letters, not even...
Well,
and we don't say commandments, actually, it's suggestions. Anyway.
So we had the oral
So-
tradition in Judaism. It was always passed by words.
they should have written it
And
down.
this version of the Bible is fairly
Torah.
recent. It's collection of our
It's a
stories.
collection of several authors that written it down.
So it could be wrong, everything we're reading.
No, it's just you can see the difference between, and it has a meaning. That's why they collected it.
No, it could be wrong though, because Moses broke the thing. It's the real one.
No, they passed the tradition orally,
No, because
and we
Moses
don't talk
broke the
about.
one.
He brought
No.
the second one.
He's written again, and he also was teaching his children and other people.
Yeah, but the very, very original one. was
What he
broke.
was written, it was not. This tradition includes more than what he was writing. It was including what happened before him as well. It's
They're not talking about he brought down.
it's not about rules on baking. This is about a family memories and passing of information from divinity to experiential knowledge. Not because one person written it as it was channeled to him, because many others were doing that as well.
Okay.
So, the interesting difference between the first chapter and the second, in the first chapter, God created the world and he made tree, which is fruit. But it didn't work. He wanted the tree to be edible.
The tree itself.
Yes, to be fruit.
A fruit tree. A tree which is fruit.
Yeah. It's pri.
It's tree.
The fruit tree, which is also edible, is a pri. But it didn't work.
So God.
And
isn't
that's
perfect.
why in the second chapter it says he changed it and made it. So in a way, the second chapter is the improvement on the universe.
No, so God isn't perfect.
No, it's a work in progress. Perfection is process. It's not a dead final one. The perfection lies in the process and the evolution. Otherwise, we will be all dead perfectly fine in the beginning. There would be no need to be born.
What do you mean?
The darkness is also perfect. It's part of the plan. It doesn't need to be judged and condemned for being dark. The dark and the light has perfect place in the perfect existence, in perfect balance. And our jobs here is also perfect, even the imperfection are perfect. You can see my illustration of the tree of life here in the energy book, and we discuss about how the body is made of energy and how we can understand that energy, how it works, and develop it further. So the first attempt at making a tree was a tree that is a fruit itself, and it didn't quite work, which is why in the second chapter of the second option, in the same chapter there's another option, says it created a tree that makes fruit,
Bells.
bears fruit.
No, but I still don't get it. Because,
What?
I thought God was meant to be, amazing.
It is
They can
amazing.
make, universes out of just
Which is
words.
why,
But they can't make a tree out of fruit. They can make a universe, but
well,
they can't make a
he
tree
made
out of
it, but it didn't work in terms of our reality. If now God gave you the perfect tool to be able to see past the horizon, past time, present and future, to see forward, past the horizon and your own back, you would go mad. Not because it's not perfect, it's perfect, but because you are incapable of dealing with that reality.
So the universe they
So
made
it-
wasn't perfect.
No, it was limited to create a human world.
Okay.
And human world cannot deal with it at the moment. Which is why it's still perfect. It's just not some. Even Moses could only see God from the back and from distance, which means it's symbolic to he could not conceive and deal and tolerate the amount of energy includes.
What if you saw God? Would you like
You'll die immediately.
face break away or something?
You would be
Corrode.
you would change your state of being to another. You can't conceive. It's like detonating an atomic bomb and watching it. You can't even see the solar eclipse with your eyes. You have to cover, otherwise you'll go blind. I'm talking about God's existence or pure godliness.
Yes, if you saw it, would you like?
You would not be able to tolerate it. Even forget about God, just pure love, 1 ounce of pure unconditional love,
What's wrong with that?
you wouldn't be able to tolerate it.
Why?
Because it's so pure that dealing with it, absolutely
Paints
pure
it
love.
immediately.
No, it just means you can't deal with that amount of energy. How many people do you know capable of looking into the mirror and truly love themselves or hug a stranger with pure love? They will be uncomfortable, they wouldn't be able to hug each other, and that's basic conditional love. We cannot conceive or understand pure divinity because of our physical limited bodies. This is evolving and maybe one day we will, but at the moment, the way things are, we are unable to do that.
Okay.
Right? So we'll go back to Bereshit. So it's very interesting though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, interestingly, after the third day, they could have the planets to illuminate the skies. So there was
Wait, so the sun was
sun
made
and
after...
the moon was created
Then how
after
can,
the
how
Earth,
can there be day and night if there's no sun?
because it's a decision made by
No, but you have day and night because of the sun and how you orbit around the sun.
perhaps it's not.
Hmm.
Perhaps the day and night is the division of your functionality. You would wake up if it's nighttime, even if you...
Yes, because I've been trained to. I can make it myself, nocturnal.
But perhaps the division is the timings of action.
So it doesn't mean literal, like,
Yeah.
moons.
So God continues and created then animals that roamed the world and birds. And he created giant crocodiles. And other, now it's interesting that he specified crocodiles, whereas he gave generic terms to other animals.
What crocodile's holy?
No, what I've read somewhere that there were other types of beings before humans that were attempted to be, but it didn't quite work out either. So even, for example, the snake, we interpret it as a snake, originally was a type of snake people, and that was mentioned also in Egyptian mythology and other cultures, that there were different type of people or beings that populated the planet, and they were extremely powerful and intelligent.
So what did they die?
Things changed and they possibly didn't, I don't know, there were reasons why they moved on. So these these crocodiles mentioned, interestingly, as well as Leviathan.
What?
Leviathan is,
yeah.
we translate it as whale, but it was a massive being, probably alongside the dinosaur style. Massive being that was threatening the existence of other animals. So all these creatures were roaming the world, and God liked it. And he blessed it, and he said, carry on and living and existing in this world. And interestingly, that's where he decided there would be evening and there would be morning.
Oh.
The evening and morning are more divisions of labor rather than physical reality. It's more, this is when I say a day of work done. It's more kind of,
Rest time.
yeah. And God said the world will continue to create animals, but we need somebody who will be like God and help looking after the world and looking after the earth and the animals and the plants. Just like I've created it, I need somebody to be my guardian of this planet.
Why couldn't you get like one of the snake men to do it?
Because obviously it was a different type of being that was not like God. They were different.
But they're really intelligent. So.
Yeah, but maybe that's not what makes humans humans. Dolphins are intelligent and yet they're not humans.
Obviously.
So God has created Adam from the word Adamah, the earth.
Okay.
Yes, he took the earth and he created in his image. Aleph is from Elohim. You
Aleph.
mix spirit and blood, you create human.
Aleph, the first letter of Adam, and Elohim,
And Adamah.
and Adamah.
Why is Eve?
God, people.
Aleph is the first element, it's the four
So it's
corners.
saying the man was made before women because Aleph begins
No.
with A and A is before E.
No, because, listen to that. The first human, the first Adam, the God created, was in the image of God, and it was male and female together, all in one. It was hermaphrodite, which
Okay.
was one being that has both male and female in
And it was
it.
called Adam.
It was called Adam.
Adam.
He was blessing it, this person, and he told them, come on, carry on, populate the world, look after it. But what he did realize is that it didn't quite work out.
Again.
A bit hard to populate that way.
You can, like strawberries do it.
Possibly, but it just didn't work for some reason, which is why the next chapter says that he then separated Chava, which means the living being, from Adam. He separated the being that is more kind of analytical and action to a living being. So he separated two qualities and made them into two beings. One was the calculating and more forceful, and the other was creative and living and more passionate. And these two qualities were created into two beings, Chava and Adam. Okay? And it's quite interesting. He told them that you can do anything on the planet. You can eat the fruit, look after the animals, look after the plants. And that was the Friday. On the seventh day, God saw that his world work was pretty much complete. And he stopped working. He stopped all his further creation to let this world be. And which is why Saturday is called Shabbat. It's where you stop, pause your actions, and you focus on reflection and connection to spiritual side of things.
Like today.
And he blessed that day and sanctified it to be the rest day. See another one of my paintings about the angels and the link to the intuition and the spirit world. And again, the more we learn to be aware of how our body works energetically and spiritually and as well as physically, we will know how to connect better to the spirit world and feel more aware and present in this reality. He is sanctified that day to be the Shabbat. Interestingly, at the time, the world didn't have rain. Instead,
But I thought God split the rain, the water into different stuff.
yes, but there was no rain. Instead, God would create a kind of fog that will come from the earth and water the earth. And Adam would then look after the earth. Now, the second chapter, overlapping, because it's been overlapping, and that man, that still didn't work the earth quite, because it says ein, which means didn't yet work the earth. The first, it's overlapping. So we had creation including Saturday in the first chapter.
Yeah.
But second chapter says, although there was no rain, the man has not yet, the earth itself was looking after itself through this fog, but the man has not yet worked the earth, because there were man and woman. The creature that was created at first didn't quite know how to operate in the world. It didn't work. That's why the God created a new person. And this time he used afar, the dust of the earth, from Adamah.
Wait, what?
Previously, he created Adam from himself. The
I thought
first.
everything was created.
Well, that's why I'm telling you that there's two overlapping stories, one after another. The first chapter described creation of a fruit tree, which is fruit itself, and a man and a woman, one being that's supposed to look after the earth. However, it didn't quite work out. So that first creation didn't quite work out. And in that creation, we had creatures like huge crocodiles and whatever.
What's wrong with that?
This
sounds pretty cool.
Yes, but it didn't work out for some reason. And that's why second chapter starts that God has decided to create human. This time he's not making him of himself, but of the dust of earth. It's a different type of being. It's a physical being, not... he breathes life into it, but it's not pure spirit like before.
Okay.
The first Adam was pure spirit. This one is physically
So
made.
humans are not pure.
We're our body, our spirit is pure, our bodies are physical. We are manifestation, a gradation of high level frequency, but on the lower end, right?
Okay.
So he created this human from the dust of the earth and breathed into his breathing system the spirit of life through breath. We don't have just a soul. We also have, there's nefesh and neshama. Neshama is the breath of God, it's the pure divinity. Nefesh is the physical animalistic force that activates your body. For example, after your spirit, your soul leaves the body, neshama leaves the body, your heart can still pump, your nails will grow, your hair will grow for a while, triggered by this animalistic force of living. So it's two different energies. So previously, the human was pure spirit, but the pure spirit could not act in physical reality the way it was meant to be, which is why we choose to be physical and not because physical can work in a physical reality. I talk in my second chapter about the various energy bodies, how it's made and how we operate with the universe on different levels, on emotional level, physical level, energy level, body level. So this time God breathed energy, the breath of God into the person and made him alive and turned him into a living being.
Wait, him or them?
Well, I'm saying him in English. At the moment there was no gender. And he planted that being in the Garden of Eden.